There's a rule in the automotive world. Every lightweight sports car, no matter how pure or perfect, eventually gets fat. One day, it's a stripped-out corner carver buzzing like a wasp through the hills, and the next, it's weighed down with thicker carpets, cushy armrests, and an infotainment system with more settings than an iPhone. The purity fades, the sharpness dulls, and suddenly, what was once a sports car is just a cruiser wearing a sports car badge. But back in the 1960s, in England, something remarkable was happening. This was the golden age of lightweight British sports cars. MG, Lotus, Austin Healey, and of course Triumph were building machines that delivered one thing above all, driving joy. And right in the middle of that movement was Triumph's bold experiment, a car that began life as a simple roadster and evolved into something more ambitious, something sleeker, something with 6 cylinders under its hood and a fastback roofline to die for. This is the story of the Triumph GT6, the coupe that earned the nickname the poor man's E-Type. But as you'll see, there's a lot more to it than just that comparison. The spark, from Spitfire to GT6. The story begins in 1963. Triumph had already found success with the Spitfire, their affordable open-top sports car designed by Giovanni Michelotti. It was lightweight, rear-wheel drive, and simple in all the right ways. But Triumph wanted more. They wanted something with refinement, something that could compete in the growing grand touring market while retaining that spirited DNA. So Triumph's technical director Harry Webster turned once again to Michelotti. He asked him to reimagine the Spitfire not as a carefree roadster, but as a fastback coupe, something that could appeal to American buyers who crave style and speed, as well as Europeans who valued sophistication. Michelotti's design was nothing short of brilliant. The result was a flowing fastback shape that looked as if it had always been meant to exist. The roofline was graceful, the proportions elegant, and the stance aggressive enough to hint at speed even at a standstill. From the outside, it was stunning, but under the skin, there was a problem. The weight problem. By bolting on a steel roof, reinforcing the chassis, and reworking the body, Triumph unintentionally added about 30% more weight compared to the featherweight Spitfire. Suddenly, what had been a lively 1,500-pound roadster now tipped the scales at nearly 1,900 pounds, and the charming little 1.2-liter four-cylinder engine that powered the Spitfire simply couldn't cope. The car looked fast, but in reality, it was sluggish. A fastback coupe that wasn't fast was a disaster waiting to happen. So Triumph went back to the drawing board, and that's where the magic happened. Enter the straight six. To solve the power problem, Triumph borrowed the 2.0-liter inline-six from their Vitesse saloon. It didn't fit neatly under the Spitfire's bonnet, so engineers added a pronounced bulge on the hood, a design feature that became a signature of the GT6. The result? 95 horsepower at 5,000 RPM and a healthy 117 pound-feet of torque available at just 3,000. That may not sound like much today, but in the mid-60s, for a compact British sports car, it was serious muscle. The GT6 could sprint from 0 to 60 in under 12 seconds and hit a top speed of 106 miles per hour. More importantly, it delivered torque and refinement that its four-cylinder rivals couldn't match. Paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, available with optional overdrive for highway cruising, it offered flexibility and long-legged comfort that made it feel like a miniature Grand Tourer. Style meets speed. Visually, the GT6 had an edge over rivals like the MGB GT. Michelotti's Koenigs gave it a distinctly Italian flavor, with flowing arches, an elegant grille, and that signature fast back profile. Twin upswept exhausts and a motorsport-style fuel filler added just the right amount of flair. Compared to the MGB GT's conservative looks, the Triumph stood out as something exotic, even daring. It looked like a car born for the autostrada rather than a British B-road. And Triumph leaned into this image. Their marketing connected the GT6 to the Spitfire's racing pedigree at Le Mans, though the reality was a bit more complicated. Still, the message stuck. The GT6 wasn't just a car, it was a statement. The poor man's E-Type. Inevitably, comparisons were made to Jaguar's legendary E-Type. After all, the E-Type was the poster child for 60s British sports cars. Long bonnet, fastback coupe styling, and a glorious straight six. But here's the catch. While the E-Type was in another league with 265 horsepower and sub-7 second 0 to 60 times, it also weighed 1,000 pounds more and cost several times as much. The GT6 wasn't an E-Type rival, but it offered something that mattered just as much. Accessibility. For a fraction of the price, you could have a stylish, 6-cylinder coupe that turned heads and delivered genuine driving thrills. It was a bargain, and enthusiasts took notice. But not everything was perfect. While the straight six brought speed and sound, the GT6's chassis struggled to keep up. The culprit was its swing axle rear suspension carried over from the Spitfire. On the lighter Spitfire, it was manageable. On the heavier GT6, with more power and more weight over the rear axle, it became a liability. At the limit, the rear could snap violently, especially if you lifted off the throttle mid-corner. Brakes too were adequate at best, with vague feel from the single-circuit setup. In short, the GT6 was fast, but it demanded respect. Drive it smoothly and it rewarded you with beautiful balance. Push it too hard and it could bite. The first generation's legacy. Despite its flaws, the first generation GT6 carved out a loyal following. It was faster than the MGB GT, prettier than most rivals, and it had the charisma of a true British sports coupe. It wasn't perfect, but it was memorable, and Triumph wasn't done refining it, because by the late 60s, feedback from journalists and owners alike made it clear that if the GT6 was going to succeed, it needed to tame its handling demons and evolve into something more complete. And in 1968, Triumph answered with the GT6 Mark II, known in America as the GT6 Plus, a car that would address the flaws, sharpen the edges, and bring the GT6 closer to greatness. The Triumph GT6's story, while short-lived compared to the giants of its time, didn't fade away into obscurity. Instead, it matured like fine wine, leaving behind a legacy that car enthusiasts today still celebrate. Because here's the thing, sometimes success isn't about mass production or being the sales king. Sometimes it's about leaving behind a car so memorable, so distinct in its design and character, that decades later it still sparks conversation. And that's exactly what the GT6 did. When you look at it today, the GT6 doesn't scream compromise. Instead, it screams individuality. It wasn't the loudest, the fastest, or even the most practical British sports car of its era, but it had character, buckets of it. That long hood with the raised power bulge, the sweeping fastback tail, and the elegant chrome touches and the unmistakable soundtrack of a 6-cylinder engine and a compact coupe body, these elements combined to create something that felt more special than the sum of its parts. Let's be honest. Back in the 60s and 70s, if you couldn't afford a Jaguar E-Type but wanted something with similar looks and an engaging drive, the GT6 was as close as you could get. And while Jaguar fans might scoff at that comparison, plenty of owners affectionately dubbed it the poor man's E-Type. But here's the real secret. In the right conditions, with its lightweight construction and sharp handling after suspension revisions, the GT6 could embarrass cars costing far more. It wasn't trying to be an E-Type, it was carving out its own lane. The driving experience. Behind the wheel, the GT6 felt alive. The straight six was smooth, offering a richer torque curve than most rivals, which meant you didn't have to wring it out like some of the 4-cylinder competitors. The optional overdrive made highway cruising a relaxed affair, something few compact sports cars of its time could claim. But perhaps the most underrated part of the GT6 experience was the way it sounded. That 6-cylinder howl was intoxicating, especially compared to the raspier notes of its 4-cylinder rivals. It gave the GT6 a grown-up character, reminding you that while this was a compact coupe, it had aspirations of being something greater. And honestly, for a car in its price bracket, it delivered. Yes, early models had handling quirks. Yes, it could be unpredictable at the edge, but by the time Triumph ironed those issues out with the Mark II and Mark III, the GT6 had matured into a proper sports coupe that combined speed, comfort, and style in a way few others could. So why didn't it dominate? Why didn't the GT6 rise to legendary commercial status like the MGB? The answer lies in market perception. MG had a stranglehold on the affordable sports car image. The MGB was everywhere, in magazines, in dealerships, on the streets. Triumph, despite building cars that could outpace and outshine MG in certain areas, struggled to match that momentum. Then, Triumph's own lineup cannibalized its potential. The Spitfire was the go-to roadster, affordable and fun. The TR series was the more serious sports car with prestige attached. That left the GT6 in an awkward middle ground. It wasn't cheap enough to win budget buyers, and it wasn't powerful or luxurious enough to attract the high-end crowd. This in-betweenness hurt the GT6 in its day, but ironically, it's this very quality that makes it so appealing now. It's rare, it's unique, and it represents a bold experiment by Triumph that gave us something truly different. The collector's appeal. Fast forward to today, and the Triumph GT6 is a gem for classic car collectors. Prices are surprisingly accessible compared to other 60s and 70s icons. You can find driver-quality cars for as little as $10,000 to $15,000, while pristine concourse-level examples rarely cross the $40,000 mark. Compare that to an E-Type, where even a restoration project could cost you 6 figures, and the GT6 begins to look like one of the most underrated bargains in the classic car world. What makes it even more appealing is the ease of ownership. The mechanics are straightforward, parts are widely available thanks to Triumph's shared components across models, and there's a passionate global community ready to help. In fact, many GT6 owners today highlight how approachable the car is for newcomers to classic motoring. Resto mods and performance builds are also becoming popular. With modern suspension upgrades, brake kits, and even engine swaps, you can turn a GT6 into a seriously capable track or touring machine. Yet many purists will argue the stock charm of the straight six and that fastback silhouette are best left untouched. Either way, the GT6 offers versatility in ways its rivals sometimes don't. The legacy. The Triumph GT6's legacy is about more than numbers. It's about design, ambition, and spirit. Giovanni Michelotti's styling still turns heads today. The car's engineering story of adapting the Spitfire into something greater, of finding ways to make a six-cylinder work in such a small body, is a testament to Triumph's creativity. Most importantly, it's about giving drivers an accessible taste of the grand touring dream. The GT6 wasn't perfect, but it embodied that golden age of British sports cars in a way that felt both aspirational and attainable.